Hello, everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode of our Moody Talks for May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I thought that I would add a few more talks in that maybe talk about things that you don't know about or you really are interested in learning more about. And I thought that I would start this one with talking about our nervous system responses. There are actually more responses. Obviously, we're humans. We're going to have more responses than just the two that everybody kind of learns about, right? The fight or flight nervous responses that we use when we may be in danger or we have a strong emotion that we're feeling. So let's get into it, okay? So I'm going to talk about two other responses that we have that are kind of more trauma responses. So people who have been in trauma that they learn to use in order to survive their trauma. And wherever that trauma is coming from. For me, it's childhood trauma. So it's something that I learned very, very early, like throughout my childhood on other ways other than fight or flight that I could use to, bring down a threat or get away from a threat. And so let's just get into the four that I'm going to talk about today. So obviously we have the fight, right? Then we have flight, which we all know about. But did you know about freeze? And then there's also one that I learned about just last year that is something that I do all of the time, fawn. Okay? So let's get into it. Fight. What do we feel when we feel like we need to fight about something? You know, like if we're angry or if we're scared, that stress response of I'm going to attack what is going to attack me, this threat that's coming at me, right? So that's a very typical response. And then there's also flight that we all know about, which is a response in the same manner. And instead of standing ground, we run. We get away from the threat as soon as possible. So those are two regular responses that you find in every day, that people will use when they feel that there's a threat involved. Okay. So now the two more trauma-focused ones, we have freeze. So freeze is one that where you're kind of the deer in headlights, right? Where your whole brain just kind of shuts down and you may actually dissociate, where you might like to actually leave the situation in your mind. So freeze can be really learned in trauma as a way to diffuse a situation, right? So just stopping what we're doing altogether and just hoping that whatever needs to happen happens and it won't hurt you, right? So freeze is definitely a trauma response in the brain, in the nervous system, where it's a shutdown and we can't really decide what to do. We're stuck like that deer in the headlights, right? And then there's fawn. So fawn, I don't know how in all of my years of therapy and all of my years of learning more about coping skills and those kind of things, my DBT skills that I've learned about, I only have heard of fawn in the last year, and it was a huge aha moment for me. I was like, really? There's such a thing as turning towards the threat and trying to diffuse it by way of, loving messages, giving them what they want, what they need in order for that threat to be diffused. And it makes a lot of sense. I do this a lot with relationships, especially if I'm in male relationships. I do not perceive those men as threats, but my brain does, way back in the back of my mind. So in, like reason mind and in wise mind, I talk about those things in the DBT skills. Those two minds are telling me that this person isn't really a threat to you physically. Maybe they are emotionally, but when I'm in emotion mind, it immediately turns on as they are a threat and I need to diffuse that threat by giving them what they want giving them, love, attention, care, giving into what they want or need at that moment, even if it's not great for me. And so I was pretty, mind blown when I heard of it because I've been living this all my life. And a lot of people in trauma do that. It's that way of diffusing. My abuser needed to have that in order for him to stop what he was doing. I needed to make sure that he felt that I loved him and that he was the greatest dad ever, whatever, that would stop that threat that could come. Now, people in my life and relationships may not ever make me feel threatened or are a threat to me, but my brain immediately during a fight and an argument where I'm angry or fearful, my brain, my emotion side will turn on that and really just give in and give them what they want. Fawn all over them, tell them how wonderful they are, how good they look today, something like that. Anything to just diffuse the situation so that I don't feel as though I'm going to get hurt. And that's, again, either physically or emotionally, mentally, in that capacity. So I think these two trauma responses are very important to know. And I don't think that you necessarily have to be in traumatic events to actually do these responses. I think that they can be very general, but they're not taught. So I figured I'd do this so that maybe you would understand your own responses to some things. Maybe you do these other two responses. Maybe you freeze and you just, dissociate from the situation in your mind because you don't know where to go with it. So you just kind of freeze and just want the situation to go away, right? Or if you freeze, if you were in a situation such as childhood where you had multiple people who were being threatened by one person, maybe the freeze response was the response that would get you not noticed, right? So there are these four, and there are other responses, but I thought it was important to point these ones out. They may be connected to trauma, to growing up in traumatic environments or being in traumatic environments. And I'm also talking about, it doesn't have to be childhood. It can be if you're in a domestic, violent situation where you've lived for numerous years in that situation. It could be it's PTSD, maybe if you were a soldier in combat. These are responses that we tend to get to in order to save ourselves. And yeah, I wanted to point these out, and hopefully this will help you guys to better understand. Maybe you know someone who's had trauma, and you've noticed that these are the ways that they respond to you. Maybe you get frustrated because the person is responding in the freeze, and you're thinking, they're not listening to me. They're not, they're not connected right now, and that could really upset you more. But maybe that is their trauma response. Maybe that's just their nervous system response to you, is they don't know what to do and the mind kind of just shuts off. They're not trying to upset you. It's just the way that their mind reacts to a threatening situation, even if it's a very small threat, like an emotional threat. It's there, and they don't do it on purpose. The same thing with fawn. Maybe you're having an argument with someone and you get really upset because they just start to change the subject and give you these compliments, or you change the subject in a way where it's more focused on you instead of them. And you're like, why are they changing the subject? I don't get that. Well, it's a fawn response. Most likely, maybe not, but for the most part, you could look at it as a fawn response. They're changing the subject and focusing more on you in a positive way so that the threat will be, taken away. Maybe that's their way of being able to stop a conversation and then going back to it when they can think more about the argument and what they need and want and what you need and want, right? So it can also be used in the sense of, I'm so upset and nervous right now. I don't even know what to think in this moment. So their mind, their nervous system changes and gives you that positive feedback, more of that, like caring, coddling type stuff, because that's the only way that they learned how to survive in other situations. So I hope this helps. I really do. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments or send me a DM, because I'd love to talk more about these things with you, and give you more information. If there's anything else you'd like to learn about during the next week or so as we close out May, I'd be more than happy to talk about those things. So let me know. Have a great weekend, and I will see you guys next week.